So I think we discussed this, that we will open straight away to the floor to have a conversation rather than us discussing any more. So if anybody would like to ask, then please wait for the mic, and so that the recording can proceed normally.
The mere fact that a company puts a film, a trailer, available in YouTube, does that give the right for people also to watch it, or to do any translation of that? If a company puts the trailer on the YouTube, isn't that giving it away?
It makes it freely available, but it doesn't mean that you can do stuff to it. Basically, you can watch it, but there isn't anything to say that you can change it or adapt it or translate it or anything.
Is that written down?
Sorry?
Is that written down?
It is in the terms and conditions of YouTube, which I'm sure you've read very carefully.
Is doing research about fans having legal or illegal things?
You have to have the authority to use the material. And in my case, I was given that authority by the people behind Alliansen who made their films available to me, and also by the prosecutor who made the fan-subbing files available to me, and also gave me the consent because they were seized by in fact, the authorities. They had the authority to do that. But one has to be careful about how much one shows and people view online and so on and so forth. So that means that you have to keep within the practice of fair use when showing clips and so on.
Let's say I have some material that I want to study for a project. And that material, because I work on translation, has been translated, but there is only a fan subtitle available. Is using that version an issue, or can I go on with my research? That's the question.
I would say probably. I'm not sure. It's all about publication, really. The research is not normally a problem unless you also provide the raw material, which makes open access problematic when you talk about open access of research data. That is not normally something you can do with this.
If fan subs are illegal, how illegal is it to study them and have access to them? And I think legislation is very unclear, and there are some countries that are not really covered by some of the legislation, which makes it even more contentious and much more difficult to pinpoint. But I do know that in certain countries, for instance in Japan, they were very concerned, and they were advising, and that was advice only, in some of the universities not to investigate the topic. And Minako Hagen has been discussing this in some of her publications because of the fear that you were dealing with something that is already legal, and therefore your work could also be considered illegal. But I don't think there is anything, and I can't see that happening anytime soon, that it will cover the whole spectrum of practices and be regulated in a way as probably some people would like to see.
And most of these issues have never been tried, and before they're tried, we actually don't know. And this is why I thought it would be interesting if we had more issues in this trial, because then we would know. But the only thing we know for sure now, and that we have a precedent on, is in fact that disseminating time subs or any form of subtitles without the consent of the original copyright holder is in fact illegal.
Was a little bit curious when you mentioned the fact that the bits of subtitles that have been ripped from DVD would be violating the rights of the subtitlers that work for the DVD, but wouldn't that be a contradiction with the fact that even the subtitled files would still be the property of the owner, of the copywriters, not the subtitlers? Because that obviously as a professional subtitler, that kind of makes me think.
Yes, you're right. It's not actually of the subtitle, because he or she has in fact sold his economic rights to the subtitles to the company that he or she works for. So they are actually the ones that whose copyright is being violated.
Right. So you do forfeit as a subtitler or as a film translator, you do forfeit the rights, don't you?
Yes, the economic rights, but not the creative rights. That's
Okay. That's very rewarding to know.
But the creative rights can actually not do anything with them. But yeah, that's the
it's just my ego feels better. One thing that was interesting about the fan subbing, and I think we discussed that some time ago, was the fact that fan subbers are not bound by conventions as much as professional subtitles, and so it's almost like they go to the playground a little bit more, and they go for a little bit more. So have you noticed any sort of pushing the boundaries in what you've seen done by fan subbers in terms of, say, well, introducing new conventions, in terms of, you know, using smileys, as we have seen, using different colours, using different, you know, different positioning on the screen and so on. Just
yes, that is what I was hoping to find, and that's when you read about early research on this is what people have been writing about, particularly when it comes to anime fan subbing. There's been a lot of that, but I think that these days you have to separate anime fan subbing and just whatever you call it, other fan subbing, because fan subbing doesn't appear to have that a lot. I mean, I went through 106 files and I found 2 smileys, 2 cases of self-censorship, and that's it.
Well, Jan was very clear about the legal situation.
Yeah.
But there's also that grey area of the practice that has been going on, as I understand from what I've been reading about it, that if there is material that is not available in a professional sub in a particular country,
Yeah.
and the fan sub is made available, then nothing's going to happen. They are not going to be prosecuted.
That's the tacit consent I was talking
Yeah.
about earlier. Yeah.
Is that still going on, or has that now moved on? You were so very clear about what the law is, what the copyright law is, what the conventions are, etc., etc. I just wanted to ask you whether things have moved on from that, or whether, in your experience, that's still going on, this gentleman's agreement.
Go ahead, and I will talk about Italy.
Right, okay. I think it's becoming, there is this tacit consent that at least fan subbers claim, but I haven't seen any actual copyright holder saying that this is in fact the case. That they don't bother about copyright as long as they get their material distributed and more people watch it, and then that could be just have a butterfly effect or introduce something to a new area, and then they will make money of it, and so they're fine and they turn a blind eye to this. I think my feeling about this, or because I haven't really researched this, is that it's becoming less of issue all the time, because there is fewer areas that don't have everything, so to speak. So everything is being more widely disseminated already, and with simultaneous releases on Netflix and so on, there isn't this gap in release times that there might have been. So I think it's becoming slightly dated, but that's just my opinion on this. I haven't really researched it. So please.
I agree with you completely. The idea, let's say, the rule in Italy was to fan sub only what wasn't available. And they never translated all that was already available. There was no point, because they were filling a gap. You know, I made the example of Lost. In 2006, in Italy, they had to wait 1 year to have the 2nd season dubbed. It was crazy at the time. So that's the reason why those communities were created. And I think it was also a platform to launch TV series in Italy, and then, you know, public channels or private channels acquired the rights, because, you know, it worked. Fan subbing helped in that way. But now things are changed. It's not like that anymore. And I think that fan subbing has always had an expiry date. And with Netflix, what's the point?
I was really interested to hear that fan dubbing doesn't seem to be a threat to professional dubbing. And I was wondering, particularly in the case of Italy that you've spoken about, whether the rise of fan subbing has in any way encouraged more kind of official, professional subtitling rather than dubbing, because dubbing is so massive in Italy. And so I was wondering whether there is now more professional subtitling of material on TV and maybe on general release in cinemas, because there's been so much fan subbing over the past few years, or whether it's made no impact whatsoever.
Now, something is changing very slowly. If you think about, we have some data from Netflix, like 80% of what is watched on Netflix in Italy is dubbed still. So there's a lot of work to do, but things have changed a lot. And I can say that some of the fansubbers that started as fansubbers are now professional subtitlers. There's an overlap, you know, of fansubbers and professional subtitlers. So it's still quite exciting and interesting. We will see what will happen in the future, because I don't think that fansub is going to, you know, continue for a long time. So all these assets will probably be used somehow, or some of them.
The courts, the cases you mentioned in Amsterdam and Sweden obviously have their direct parallel in the music industry with the Napster case and Sean Fanning in the late 90s, I think it was. And of course since then the music industry has had to deal with the whole issue of downloading, both legal and illegal ever since then. But what has resulted is a very subtle, quite welcome change in the music industry in that it has resulted in more live music. The economics has moved to live music because the digital artifacts, the songs, are simply being used as marketing tools for live gigs. And my question is, does the panel see any kind of unexpected and possibly welcome changes in the translation industry as a result of new technologies?
I think we've seen it is very exciting in the way that things are developing and panning out in audiovisual translation, simply because we are communicating a lot more audiovisually. And then we're getting, for instance, one of the things that a few years back you just wouldn't get with subtitles, not even distributed. And now, because of all these moves, all these grassroots groups and communities are working on it, is political video clips. We got, a few years back, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, in Spain, some of the new political parties, they were really promoting the translation, the subtitles of some material that you would never really reach in any other part of the planet in such a way. Sometimes with translations that are pretty problematic in the sense that they are so specific for a very particular place, in this case it was Spain, but also a particular moment, that even myself, I wasn't able to follow some of the things because I've been living in this country for a bit too long. And then the translations have to spell out. It was very easy in the end because it was all the name and then corruption case. Something that said corruption case, which was the blight in Spain at the time. But it was surprising that they will go to those lengths to translate, to circulate, to just sort of internationalize the plight and trying to get to other communities in the rest of the world to know what was happening there. We saw it at the very beginning with Greece, where you will get lots of material translated, that before it wasn't. And I think that is a development that the commercial side of the industry wouldn't take care of. They just wouldn't translate those things. And it has been the activist groups, it has been the, somebody called them guerrilla subtitlers, taking that on board and trying to communicate that information to the rest of the world. And in my particular case, I think that's a very interesting development. Some people might not say it out, but I think that's been a welcome development. And I think the other thing that probably we need to differentiate here, and still because the area is so new, we struggle to call things by their names. When we say amateurs, Jan was very quick to say, but actually some of them are already have got some experience, or they might be professionals. There are cases of professionals working on subtitling during the day, and then in the evening they do something else in subtitling as well, for political reasons, for educational purposes. So we've got that recreational approach, which is more this fan-subbing, but there is a lot of amateur or all the practices, errant practices of translation or cyber subtitling that is not in that real, it's not that part of the commercial side, whereby copyright is not that important, and on the opposite, there is copyleft that is being copied in, and people asking you, okay, feel free, translate, I want you to get no, and feel welcome, and do it. So I think that is also changing the way we approach it. Just to close there, I was at one conference and a meeting, and there was somebody from Afghanistan, and they had launched a sort of virtual library, and they had lots of videos in different languages, particularly in English, that they wanted to translate into some of the languages in the country in Afghan, simply to make it easier and safer for girls to have access to culture, because it was dangerous to go to the school. And that's what they were calling people, can you translate this? And I don't think that will be an issue of any copyright or any problem like that. People will feel much more ethically involved and engaged in those sort of practices.
I don't think we can see a similar change in the sense that, coming up with a new platform. But I think in the field of audiovisual translation, things have changed drastically. And if you think of the film industry, they have had to find ways of earning money, because nowadays, unfortunately, people are not going to the cinema that often. And I can see, for example, in the video game industry, there is a lot of cinematic material. So they've seen that the video game industry is quite successful, so they've tried to incorporate some of their techniques there. And I think in another field, for example, VR, virtual reality, that now is, has developed quite a lot. And there's now been research on how virtual reality is going to be translated. Because if you add subtitles there, the idea is that it's completely immersive, so having a text going around might not be that immersive. So I think there are different challenges that we will have to react to. We'll need to think of audiovisual translation in a different way, and different models. I was referring to crowdsourcing in the sense of just to gather money, crowdfunding, to gather money to show that a project is really worth investing in. And for example, in video game, again, there is a video game called Grand Theft Auto, which I guess many of you are familiar with. That video game has mainly been subtitled. And there is in Spain a group of dubbing actors who decided to do a trailer dubbed, just to show to the industry the potential of dubbing. So I think even the own partakers are just trying to maybe be proactive. I think nowadays you cannot just sit and see how things change. You have to do things and try to find other ways for the industry to work with you.
When it comes to the underlying product, the film or the TV program, I think the changes are already happening in the way that Spotify, in a way, is an answer to Napster, and Netflix and HBO and so on, is the answer to the Pirate Bay, or advertised funded clips on YouTube.
How bad can starting as a fan subber be for a translator? I'll put you into a situation if I can. It was 2012 and it was two of us, and we both did the exam, if you want to call it so, for Subspedia. And then I just didn't like the way they worked, so I just didn't do it. It was mainly for that, not for ethical reason. I started translating for TED instead. I like the video more, and I prefer the way they work. But the other colleague actually worked for Subspedia. I more or less know his career, so I know how it works. But in general, can that be bad for a translator, or can that be sort of experience you can still claim on your CV?
Okay, fan subbing and subtitling are two different systems. They have different rules. So, if you want to be a fan subber, you need to relearn things. If you start as a subtitler, or the other way around. What I can tell you is that while I was working for my PhD, I had to become a fan subber myself, because there were no information at the time. So I was like in the community in disguise, then I told them what I did, and at first they weren't very happy about that, but it was the only way. It certainly helped me quite a lot in terms, not for the translation part, the linguistic part, but mostly on the technical side. They're very tech savvy, and this is something that as a teacher I try to work on with my students, because technology, the fast pace of technology, we need students, so would-be subtitlers, to be ready. Cloud subtitling, for example, but there are very positive things that one can learn from fan subbers. It's not all bad at all.
sometimes the industry sort of realizes that there are some skills that you can pick up as a fan sub that can be useful. When I was at the FIT conference in San Francisco a few years back, there was this presentation by this Indian fellow from India, whose name has eluded me for some reason. And he was telling people about this TV station in India where they had their own subtitles, but there was so much fan subbing going on, so they started a competition saying, this is an episode, we're putting it out there on the internet, you just go ahead and fan sub it. And then they sent their fan sub files in, and the two best translators got jobs with the company. So that was their way of recruiting. And so sometimes, but it all depends on how the industry looks at fan subbing, I think.
I guess things are changing. You know, the threshold of acceptance of fan subbers is changing slightly in the industry. But I remember a few years back in one company, and it was very clear. You know, if as a fan subber you're quite happy to break copyright and infringe the anonymity of some of the programs, how on earth am I going to give you a job and to translate my work that is always, you know, surrounded by confidentiality with the client and so on. It really sort of depends on companies and depends on how they say things. And I don't think this is one answer to that.
But is there any way that fan subtitling can be legal? Like, because in China, it's the versions provided by the fan subtitles are perhaps, in most cases, the only versions you can get. And there is a huge demand in China, and we don't have, obviously the fan sub groups cannot buy the copyright, it's too expensive. So are there any ways that we can make it legal? Thank you.
I wish I could speak Chinese, because I think it's a very interesting landscape or mediascape where things are happening. The government is very strict on the material they can get into the country, and therefore it takes, you know, groups like the one you belong to take it on themselves to distribute whichever material they think is appropriate or they would like to do. And it's fascinating to see how not only do they do the translation, but they seem to be in control of the material that is being distributed. If I know if I am in front of an audience from China, that the Big Bang Theory is going to be really popular, or House of Cards, simply because fan subbers have taken upon themselves to translate those. Had they translated, I don't know, other programs, they would be popular in the country. And I think what is, you know, the little that I've been reading on the topic, that is changing a lot, is that people are becoming much more inclined to watch things on the internet, whereas before it was more the television, and to watch them as well as subtitles in a country like China where everything gets more dubbed. And surprisingly enough, or funnily enough, there are only 3 countries in the world where Netflix hasn't made it yet, and yours is one of them, together with North Korea, probably not much longer, and then Syria. That's it. So it might well be an opportunity there for some of the groups to start initiating conversations, probably, or to make their interest known to companies like Netflix, in the sense that, you know, they know there's going to be the way to enter the country. It's not going to be through the television, it's not going to be through the OTT distribution. And as we know, there is still very little training, academic training or professional training taking place in China. So I would imagine as well that at the very beginning it will be people like you and the people in your groups that have got a little bit of experience compared to the rest of the population and academic programs that don't contemplate training people in audiovisual translation. The legality will always be a problem, and I think you've got 2 levels there, with copyrights from the original producers, plus whatever impositions or whatever decisions are taken by the Chinese government, allowing or not allowing certain programs to be circulated.
We can create as many laws as we want, we can make as many things as we want, but as you said, when there is a desire for consumption, the solution will appear. So the fact that there is censorship in certain countries, and I'm sure that many people would forgive the copyright infringement if it was for a good cause. So if you want to promote women's rights in Saudi Arabia, I doubt that anybody here would defend the law and the legality of things. So law, in my experience, only applies as a market reserve in the markets that are competitive. In the markets that are not competitive, we ourselves that are defending our profession when it comes to Italian, French, Spanish, German, and the traditional languages, when there is a lot of supply, we will relax our righteousness when it comes to good causes in the other places. So I think that the question is fluid. The situation is fluid. And in China, the Chinese are very, very savvy. In fact, I would just correct what you said. There are over 400 universities in China that teach professional translation, and most of them teach also subtitling. It's part of the curriculum. So I'm part of a WeChat group where they track that stuff. So I think that it's a way that allows countries that don't. I'll pick an example, Montenegro. Not everybody speaks English, German, French, and they want to see House of Cards. They will have to have it translated to their language by fan subbers because it's not an economically viable market. It's quite different from Sweden, it's quite different from Italy, so we need to take that into consideration too. There are other aspects that affect legality. The lawyers will go after the case only when there is money to be made. If there is no money to be made, they're not going to go after it.
On the other side, there are also people, and they need to be paid somehow. The directors, the actors, the scenographers, and I think the questions of subtitles being legal, or sorry, fan subs being legal or not, it's not. The question is of you are using this to see a film that you've downloaded illegally. So that's not the question of the fan sub itself. And to show you that there is a will and then there is a right, we have the Marrakesh Treaty, which is for accessibility. And in case of accessibility, if you're not making money off of it, you can provide it without a copyright from the copyright owner. So you can produce subtitling for the deaf and hard of hearing and audio description without the permission of the copyright holder, as long as you are not making money on this. So I think this is something that we have to have in mind, because I'm thinking, I've translated a book a couple of years back about Dickens, who fought in his times to have copyright because his books were illegally translated and he was so poor. But his books were so popular that he had nothing to live off. So it would be the same. I wouldn't like for my book to be translated into Spanish and for Spanish people to have it accessible and me not see a euro from it, right? So I think this is something we also have to have in mind. I'm sorry, because I'm between the industry and the academia, and I'm between doing research but also providing services, and I see the problem there.
Yeah, but sorry, the answer they give you straight away, and it's been mentioned, but most of them is that they do it on a voluntary basis. So we go back to square one, like in accessibility. If they're not charging, they're still entitled to do it. Now the reality is that, and I believe as well broadly with accessibility, but I will have to investigate that further, but the reality is that, for instance, TED, and somebody's working for them or doing work for them, TED generates money. They do pay certain people a certain amount of money. Translators, the ones that are the gatekeepers and the ones doing the check-in and so on. Not much, but they do pay. So once you enter that dynamics, then you're getting people working for free or slaving for free, whereas some of the people are getting money. The guy from Undertext with all the revenue from marketing and so on, making also money. And you've got cases, for instance, Viki, this platform that started in the Far East as well. Everybody was submitting their subtitles and then eventually became a financial enterprise. So there is a very thin line in there, and not the people, the ones portraying their activity as altruists, are as altruist, they really are when they generate money. But, that's very difficult to contrast, and when they tell you, well, I do it for free. So.
If I can add something, Fansubbing in Italy is a drop in the ocean. Who is making money are streaming websites that use the fan subs that are made for free, and they make money. but they're based in, I don't know, Russia, somewhere.
Mm.
They're making money. And another thing about accessibility is that in Italy, fan subs were really helpful for the deaf community.
Thank you very much to our panelists. I'm sure you'd like to join me in showing our appreciation for a really informative and useful evening.